Welcome, everyone, to today's Schwartz Center Compassion in Action webinar, The Neuroscience of Compassion, Tools to Tap into Its Power for Good. Thank you for joining us. I'm Julie Collier, Senior Director of Programs here at the Schwartz Center. As many of you know, we are a Boston-based nonprofit organization established in 1995 to champion compassion for all who seek and provide healthcare. Our mission is to partner with healthcare organizations to advance compassion for patients, care teams, and their healing relationships. Through innovative programs, education, and advocacy, we support healthcare workers' well-being and foster meaningful connections among healthcare professionals, enabling them to provide the empathic, person-centered care that every patient deserves. Before we begin, I'd like to share a few details about what you can expect. Please note that the program will last 60 minutes with a panel discussion for the first 40 minutes or so, followed by some time for questions. Feel free to enter your questions in the Q&A pane throughout the discussion. I'd also like to acknowledge with gratitude that this Compassion in Action webinar series has been funded in part by a generous donation made in memory of Julian and Eunice Cohen, as well as through year-round support from our national business members. With that, I'll hand it over to Dr. Michael Gustafson, Schwartz Center CEO.
Thanks, Julie, and thanks for everyone for joining us today. At the Schwartz Center, this is a special year as we're celebrating our 30th anniversary since our founding in 1995. We're really proud that over the last 3 decades, we've contributed to defining compassion, working on how to improve compassion for both caregivers and patients, and trying to focus on the art and science of compassion. So as we thought about speakers for our webinar series this year, we thought it would be really perfect and an ideal fit to hear from leaders at the Sanford Institute for Empathy and Compassion. And so we're really thrilled that we've got an esteemed panel of experts who will speak today about the neuroscience of compassion, tools to tap into the power of good. I'm happy to introduce Dr. Will Mobley, the director of the Sanford Institute. With Bill today is Dr. Lisa Eyler, a clinical research psychologist and director, the Center for Empathy and Compassion Training and Medical Education. Dr. Yvonne Kaplan-Liss, director of the Center for Compassionate Communication. And Val Lance-Gaffreau, director of Communication Education in the Center for Compassionate Education. With that, I'll hand it off to Bill to get us started.
Great. Thanks so much, Julie and Michael. Great to be here with you and with the people who are in the room with us, the Zoom room with us. Just would point out that what we do in the Institute is so highly consistent with what goes on in the Schwartz Center, and that thank you for having really helped me in the early days of creating the Institute to know how much support I had from the Schwartz Center. So thanks very much. In a nutshell, we at the Institute really believe that understanding the neurobiology of empathy and compassion can make a substantial contribution to sustaining empathy and compassion in medical professionals, and maybe especially in the context of very difficult situations that they confront daily. You know, how do you continue to be your best self? How do you continue to be the most effective person you can be, the most compassionate caregiver you can be when everything seems to be going sideways, when there's too much to do and too little time, and then the stresses of the workplace? So we really believe that we have something to offer, and that understanding the brain can really advance our ability to be well ourselves, but also to help our patients. Next slide is a really interesting picture. This is a painting by Sir Luke Fildus. And what I want you to do is to look at the light and see that the light is in bringing forward a sick child, a sick girl, little girl, and a man who's staring at her who is her physician, Dr. Murray. And note his complete locked-in focus on her, his complete devotion in this one moment, in this one place, to caring for that child. That dedication, that energy, that devotion to duty, sadly, with the dying child, led many years later to a response to a commission offered by Sir Henry Tate to Luke Fildus. And he said to Sir Luke, he said, "I'd like to commission a painting, please paint whatever you would like." And Sir Luke painted this. Notice that, in fact, those two people in the back of the frame, in the darkness, partial darkness, the man standing is Sir Luke, and his wife, bereft of all hope, with her head in her arms on the table, is suffering through this very difficult circumstance. And the painting was chosen. Sir Luke chose to paint this because of the incredible devotion that he saw in Dr. Murray. And we hope then for the same kind of extraordinary care and value in all of our colleagues. We know that this is vital to medicine. Devotion to caring is fundamentally who we are as a profession. We know that every physician really should be equipped with the tools necessary, but we're also aware of the dilemma. The dilemma that says, how can we hold on to this? How can we hold on to our best selves in difficult situations? And so what we've decided is that we need to create programs informed by good basic science, and basic science programs informed by practical applications that will, in fact, build value for our healthcare professionals. So we endeavor to explore the neurobiological basis of empathy and compassion, and then to apply the insights to support training of medical professionals, students and physicians at this point, but of course we hope to expand to other medical professionals and indeed to other professionals in time. And here's important. We aim to create and provide resources to enable individuals and organizations to support the therapeutic alliance, the engagement of patient by physician, the engagement of patient by healthcare provider that really builds respect and value and enables empathy and compassion. Next slide, please. So our story in brief is that about 20 years ago, I was asked to moderate a panel with the Dalai Lama and with neuroscientists, and I considered it a pretty challenging goal, because here I was interacting with people who had a very different way of thinking about thought and consciousness and compassion and empathy. But I recognized that both the contemplatives and the neuroscientists had a kind of process that they involved themselves in, one that was quite logical and that led them from asking a good question to providing a reasonably good and perhaps sometimes very good answer. And leaving that conference, I thought, we really need now to build an edifice called the neurobiology of empathy and compassion. I believed it then, I believe it now, and some 20 years later, we were really lucky to have Denny Sanford provide a gift that made it possible then to create an institute whose fundamental objectives are focusing on empathy and compassion, the neurobiology, but also the application. So next slide. So our vision then is a transformation of medical education in which an emphasis on skill learning and competence in empathy and compassion parallels that of scientific and technical skills. The goal then includes basically understanding how do we create a body of knowledge that is robust and rigorous? How do we link that body of knowledge with the everyday lives of our colleagues in medical care? And how do we develop curricula that make those skills very available, very accessible, again, to sustain the empathy and compassion and the wellness of our physicians and our nurses, and also the wellness of our patients? So next slide, please. So let's define empathy. So empathy is the act of understanding, being aware of, being sensitive to, and vicariously experiencing the feelings, thoughts, and experiences of another. I love the word resonance here. It's essentially resonating with the feelings of the other, feeling with the other. So the characteristics are that it's an affective state. It's a state in which we have a kind of isomorphic perspective with the other person. We're really standing in their shoes, if you will. It's elicited by our ability to observe and imagine the other state, but at the same time, one knows that the other person is the source of one's own affective state. So what do we know about empathy? And next slide, we've learned so much about empathy, especially empathy for pain during the last 15 or 20 years. Tanya Singer was one of the leaders in this field very long time ago, and has propelled the field forward with her trainees since time. Most studies of empathy in humans employ fMRI, and they look for essentially brain activations in the context of interventions that evoke empathy or that evoke compassion. So studies for empathy for pain have routinely identified these two nuclei, the anterior insula and the anterior mid-cingulate cortex. So the AI and the AMCC, and you can see those little yellow sort of rectangles and squares and circles. These are denoting brain activations in a task that engages empathy. The anterior insula contributes by facilitating self-awareness, enabling individuals to understand how the other person is feeling. And the ACC, the anterior cingulate, complements this by monitoring and modulating these affective experiences. Together, then, they link emotional sharing and cognitive evaluation and regulation. Next slide. Well, what's the next step? It's cognitive empathy. It's also called mentalizing or theory of mind or cognitive perspective taking. This is a next really essential step, if you will, in moving from empathy to compassion, because under cognitive empathy, we think about learning how to attribute to other people what they're actually feeling. What are their intentions? What are their desires? What are their beliefs? So cognitive empathy is understanding another's thoughts and feelings and desires. The characteristics then are thinking about what another is thinking about, understanding how the other's thoughts impact their feelings and their responses, and then knowing that the other's thoughts and desires are not our own. It's a quite critical element of function to both be able to resonate with, but then to pivot to being able to think about the other, to understand how the other's feeling. Next slide. Cognitive empathy is really a very interesting topic. Here again, looking at some fMRI images. And what I would point to here is, and I'm not sure I can point to it with my pointer, but there's a region that kind of is a bluish and also light bluish region that is toward the back of the brain. You can see in slide in the above SDF. Thank you there. And then just again, right, Nick, perfect there. Yeah. And then let me just actually, go back to that first image, if you will. So that region is the temporal parietal junction. It's quite important for theory of mind. In other words, for understanding what the other person is thinking and believing and desiring. And that TPJ, if you will, interacts with the precuneus shown in that middle slide, yes, to help one embody another's individual pain experience, for example. And then the TPJ also works with medial prefrontal cortex and other brain regions to sort of integrate the whole story, to put it all together in a way that allows one to really understand then both the cognitive and affective components of empathy. The next slide talks about compassion. So what's compassion? To experience the consciousness of another's distress with a desire to alleviate it. In essence, it's feeling for the other, and some would include acting to alleviate the burden of another. So characteristics are, though you're not sharing the other's distress in the instant, you're aware of it, you feel warmth and concern for the other, and you have a strong motivation to help. Next slide shows that the regions that are now involved in compassion, the so-called compassion network, again, as assessed by fMRI, are those in red. And notice that some of these regions, VTA, SN, that's ventral tegmental area, substantia nigra, ventral striatum is VS, nucleus accumbens. Those are regions that are not only involved in motor activity, but are highly involved in reward activity. So it's been stated that compassion is in some ways its own reward. Next slide. And so questions that are asked, I think, quite rationally are, if there is real value in empathy and compassion, can you train to enhance the operation of neural circuits that support them? Can you create subjective and objective measures of efficacy? Can you employ brain-based signals to improve both? And the existing data suggests that the answer is yes, that you can actually modify, enhance empathy and compassion, brain function. Next slide is a very interesting experiment that I'll refer to from Tanya Singer and her colleagues. Essentially, she created an affect group and a memory group. The affect group trained initially for empathy and then later trained for compassion. The memory group trained for memory 2 different occasions. Now, to begin with, pre-measurement time number 1, before training 1, both groups of individuals looked at videos of suffering and also non-suffering people, and they responded to a questionnaire, and then they did imaging studies. Then there was training, and the empathy people trained for sharing the suffering of another. And the memory group just trained for memory. Then post-1 measurement, they again showed the videos and asked the people to comment on the suffering they saw, and then they did imaging. And then finally, they trained for compassion. And the idea there was to have kindness for others. This is the affect group, or in the memory group, just memory. And then finally, they measured again, asking questions about what people felt and doing brain imaging. The outcome of the study was really quite striking. The first point is that they confirmed that empathy circuits were involved during empathy training in the blue, AI and AMCC again. Secondly, they were able to confirm that those regions that we pointed to as the red regions, the compassion regions, were in fact engaged during compassion training. Now, here was a really interesting finding. The interesting finding was that just training for empathy encouraged people to have negative feelings, really uncomfortable feelings, if you will, about people who were suffering, but also in videos of people who are not suffering. In other words, empathy exaggerated one's appreciation of suffering in the other, whereas the compassion training lessened those uncomfortable feelings and actually promoted more comfortable feelings toward the suffering. So the bottom line here is that one can train for empathy and compassion and can use the brain biology to teach us how to do that more effectively. Next slide. So empathy and compassion are a process. They begin with seeing you, perceiving your emotional state, i.e. recognizing you, empathizing by resonating and by perceiving your emotional state, cognitive empathy, and then by caring and acting. Next slide shows that there are many different places where we can essentially fail. We may not be able to perceive. We may be afraid to perceive. We may want to resonate with your emotional state, but become overwhelmed with emotional contagion and therefore unable to perceive your emotional state, hijacked, if you will, by the suffering you see in another. Or perhaps fearful or unable to care or to act. All of these things are places where we fall down, and all of them are subject to really careful scientific study and evaluation. Last slide for me It's just this next one, pointing again to this therapeutic dialogue. So we attend to show recognition. We listen and gain respect. We communicate and generate trust. We feel with and perceive to encourage the development of empathy. And we consider skillfully to be able to engage in compassion and care. This is the therapeutic dialogue between physician and patient. It's the one we intend to promote. We believe this dialogue, this alliance, if you will allow for skillful empathy and compassion to arise and to be sustained in our colleagues. Next slide. It's really my pleasure to turn over now to our Center for Compassionate Communication, prominently Dr. Yvonne Kaplan-Liss, who's its director, and Val Lance Geffro, who's director of communication education. I was very, very happy and really lucky to encourage Yvonne and Val to come to UCSD, to the Institute. These are incredibly talented women, a physician in Yvonne, actresses both, artists both, and really people with not only a passion for compassion, but an incredible ability to teach for it. And so with that, I'll turn it over to them, and please take it away, guys.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you. And we're so excited to be here. So we just learned a lot from Bill about what happens in the brain with empathy and compassion, but I'm sure there are people out there. The burning question is, how do you teach this? Can you teach it? And we focus our efforts on teaching compassionate communication. Val and I have been partners in crime for the past 15 years, dedicating ourselves to developing novel arts and humanities-based curriculum to train health professionals to communicate with compassion. This is our team. On the left is Norma, who keeps our very fast train on the tracks. There's Val, who's a theater professional. She'll speak in a second. I'm I'd like to say recovering journalist. I never tell anybody I was in show business, but thank you, Bill, for outing me. And a physician. And on the right is Dr. Bulkholtz, who is in our pilot group of fellows. We're going to talk about our fellowship, and a palliative care doc. We came to UCSD, thankfully, to be able to actually evaluate the impact of this curriculum that we've been developing and teaching. And next slide. I'm going to give you a 30,000-foot view of what our center looks like. Next slide, please. There we have it. So Val, I'm going to let you introduce yourself first.
Hi, everybody. Nice to be here. My background, as Yvonne said, is in theater, and I've learned a whole lot over the last 15 years about how that can be effective for people in both science and medicine. So I'm excited to share a little bit about our work as we proceed.
So the mission of our center is to inspire the practice of compassionate communication in healthcare. And we're doing that at UCSD, and we're also scaling up within UCSD and out. Just for a 30,000-foot view, the hub of our work is our fellowship, the Train the Trainer Fellowship. And it's a longitudinal fellowship that we are evaluating. We're going to share soon some promising preliminary results on improving compassionate communication as well as wellness in our fellows. And at the spokes are what's coming out of this hub of training trainers. And the first thing is the affiliate faculty, which by the end of December, we will have trained 100 fellows, and they are already rippling. And we'll touch on that in a little while. And our next steps are to measure the ripple effect of what they've learned in the fellowship and how they're applying it in their work lives and personally. Also, Lead with Compassion is our efforts to scale outward. Val will talk a little bit about that workshop. We also offer facilitation manuals for educators to be able to actually facilitate the exercises we do in our workshops and Train the Trainer Fellowship. We do workshops, and we also have virtual training, a course on Coursera, and monthly webinars that we'll touch on. But today I want to just focus on the impact we've had with our fellowship. And we've just published our first paper in academic medicine, and this is some of the qualitative data. Next slide. This is our research team. Dr. Amy Bintliff is an education researcher. Val and I and her doctorate student. Next slide.
So why the arts and humanities? The literature shows that med-ed shows promise for improving physician compassionate communication, but the research is limited largely to medical education, whereas our students are mid-career clinicians primarily. The literature also focuses on program descriptions rather than evaluation or learner assessments. And it really only considers medical learners to the exclusion of others. Next slide. Our fellowship is a 60-hour experiential workshop, very deep dive into these techniques. And as far as we know, we are the only ones who incorporate learning of both medical professionals and artists. And we use the arts for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is that the arts the arts are largely metaphoric. They help us tap into our own stories by stepping away from them and looking through the lens of other people's experience. And the result of that is that defenses are lowered, people become more creative in their problem solving, and there's a lot of feeling in the room. People become connected to each other and their own passions and concerns in a really elegant way. Next slide. So the integration has been deeply felt by our clinical fellows. We thought we'd share one of those voices. What's been very unique in this training compared to anything else I've done is the focus on drawing on the communication expertise of journalists and the arts, particularly theater. It had never occurred to me that there's a wealth of wisdom about communication in many other fields besides those who trained me. So the fellows really appreciate being able to learn along a multidisciplinary track. Next slide.
So the purpose of our research is to evaluate the effects of our fellowship on practicing clinicians and artists. Next slide, please. And we use this theoretical framework, the transformative learning theory. It's an adult learning theory. It focuses on the expansion of consciousness through which an individual can question themselves, their own feelings and beliefs and assumptions, on their purpose through critical reflection and their new experiences. You know, thinking about how am I learning? Where am I at in this process? And here it is. Here's the 10 steps to learning. And when our fellows come into the program, they don't have any idea what they got themselves into. Val and I try to explain it. We try to explain to everybody what we actually do, but you don't really know it till you're in it. And that's the disorienting dilemma. And through our 60 hours, our data has shown that we get them through self-examination, a critical examination of assumptions, a recognition that others have shared similar transformations. The arts is so great at getting us to these steps. And then by the time they're done, they're usually at exploration of new roles or developing a plan for action. That gets them to our affiliate faculty program, where we continue to support them to get them through to number 10, where they start to integrate what they've learned, what they're teaching in their work lives, but also so powerful in their personal lives. And that's really exciting to watch. Next slide, please. This is a photograph of our first affiliate faculty retreat in May, and you can see we don't only train doctors, it's interdisciplinary. There are nurses and PhDs and social workers, and of course the artists, which are essential part of our training. Next slide, please. And we are now working on the mixed method study. So the academic medicine paper was qualitative. We're now doing the quantitative analysis. We're about halfway through. Next slide, please. And this is from our paper. So on the left side, we like to call this the special ingredients, the secret sauce. This is what our fellows identified through interviews with our research team about what was unique and special about their experience. that improve their other skills. So at first, they always mentioned time and resources. They were given 60 hours of time. They were supported to do this experience, really unusual now in healthcare. They had time to reflect, which they never get to do in their busy lives. They felt very safe. Psychological safety was really important. And Val and I and our team worked really hard at scaffolding the curriculum, at putting the right people in the room so they can be safe to make these leaps that they've been making. Val mentioned the arts and humanities curriculum. Co-learning with artists was really key to a lot of our learners, and the artists felt the same way about the clinicians, and of course the train the trainer model. And these special ingredients that make the cake, this is what the impact of our training was their teaching and mentoring improved, their pacing of their communication. They improved in checking for understanding, and most important, the foundational piece of compassionate communication is empathic listening. And the quantitative research tools that we're analyzing now is measuring empathy, compassion, well-being, and mindfulness. Next slide. And the ripple effect that we keep talking about. So these are what our fellows are already doing, are now affiliate faculty. We purposely picked them from every department, so we would have representatives all across in every department. They use this curriculum, they teach at their team meetings, they give grand rounds, they become wellness directors, they teach fellows and residents. They've already presented at national meetings, they're starting to publish. They're doing external training, and like Lisa's doing, incorporating this in the medical student curriculum.
We have hundreds of hours of quotes, but we wanted to just share a couple of more. This one on empathic listening. I think prior to this, I would spend a lot of time trying to get to the end of the conversation rather than just listen. Normally, I just try to come up with a solution, but now I spend more time listening and responding. We get a lot, so much feedback on the impact of listening. And while this is very beneficial for themselves, of course, we're doing this as a train the trainer process. When I graduated, I immediately came back to my team and, or I was already sharing, and I'm still sharing. I shared at my last staff meeting, and I want to bring in some of these techniques. And, because what I've noticed is we have a problem communicating with each other. So there's tremendous enthusiasm when they leave the fellowship to share what they've learned and create this ripple effect. And then finally, we had heard anecdotally about wellness improving, but here's a quote on burnout. I was pretty burned out going into the fellowship, and I think my energy is very different now. And the fact that I get to continue the fellowship work is a part of that. And so, I know that I'm just showing up better for the people in my life, because I'm enjoying the things that I get to do at work. And I think that's part of what the arts does, is it helps tap in to our passion. I'm throwing this back to you, Yvonne.
Yeah, so our next steps, we're scaling up the fellowship with multiple interprofessional cohorts. Like I said, our 7th one already is starting in September, and we're almost filled in our next one in the spring. We are offering Lead with Compassion workshops. We've done one already. We're offering one in this coming April. It's a condensed version of our fellowship. So it's a 2-day curriculum. Everybody's welcome to come. We're integrating patient feedback and experiences in future studies. And our next big endeavor is analyzing the ripple effect of the fellowship. And a big dream of all of ours at the Institute is expanding the curriculum to help educators and caregivers and much, much more. Next slide. This is a QR code. You're going to get these slides later, so if you can't get it right now, you'll get it later. This is just our academic medicine article that just got published, and it shows our data that I went over just now. Next slide, please. And here are our trainings. The QR code will also get you right to them. We have monthly webinars that we give. We gave our first one in May. It's on our website. We're going to record them and everybody can come back and look at them. But these are our next titles. The next one is in September. And The asynchronous learning on Coursera is available for everybody. And like the Lead with Compassion workshop is 2 days. Those are the dates, April 8th and 9th. And the facilitation manuals are available on our website, free for all. We have videos that actually show how to facilitate the exercises. So even if you haven't done them, you will have a chance at teaching them. And now we're going to transition to Lisa. Lisa was in one of our cohorts, and besides all the wonderful programs she has with the medical students, she does incorporate some of our work in that, and I'll toss it to Lisa.
Great. Thank you so much, Yvonne and Val. Yeah, I just want to echo the quotes that you heard, that the fellowship has been really transformational for me, and it's been wonderful to be able to have our many fellows be involved in some of the medical education offerings that I'm going to tell you about, and in developing them. And we use a lot of the techniques from the compassionate communication curriculum with our medical students. So what's special about training medical students? You've heard about training clinicians and artists. What about these medical students? I think some of the present day realities for med students is that there's a high emphasis on the knowledge and science and getting that in and taking these high stakes standardized tests. The pandemic has had an impact on our learners that is still being felt. When I first started, it was right after the pandemic, and it was very clear that students were feeling very isolated because of the pandemic, but also just their learning styles had changed compared to other cohorts. And I think that's still rippling down right now. And just med school in general is a place where there's just, a fire hose, a fire hydrant of information that's trying to be brought in. Students really never feel like they have enough time to even process what's going on. So we get burnout among medical students, as well as loneliness and just a sense of they're just putting one foot in front of the other and studying for these tests so that they can get to the next stage of medical education. But as Dr. Mobley suggested, we're trying to balance between the art and the science of medicine. And really the idea here is to look at where are these failure points and how can we target it? How can we help students to be better able to perceive and recognize when someone is suffering? How can we help them to feel with, but then quickly move to a more cognitive empathy strategy so that they are not stuck in wallowing in that emotion, and have the skills to then be able to move to be on that edge of what some people call exquisite empathy, where you can feel with and recognize that suffering and then quickly move into the brain systems and the structures and behaviors that support a motivation to do good for that person, to help. And then giving them some skills like the ones that were just talked about in terms of compassionate listening and compassionate communication that overcomes some of the barriers, the fear, or the unwillingness, problems with motivation. So in all of our offerings within the curriculum side of Sanford Institute, and particularly in medical education, we are looking to develop programs that help to balance between the science and art of medicine. And we do that by incorporating arts and humanities-based activities, many of them similar to what our people are getting in the fellowship, as well as contemplative practice. And we use, as everything in the Institute, we try to use rigorous research to refine and validate our approaches. And we collaborate with students. They have the lived experience of what it's like to be a med student today and what they need. And so we'd like to help to co-create things with our medical students and give them some resources and support to create their own programs in empathy and compassion. We also have been very fortunate to have a lot of support from our leadership here at UC San Diego, and then the structural support of the Institute as well as the school. And that has been a key ingredient in developing some of these curricula. And then we've been able to share programs with other institutions and then learn from those institutions. And we would love to have additional partnerships with other institutions. And so at the end, I'm going to show you how you can contact us if you would like to bring some of these programs to your school. The flagship programs that we have right now are Compassionatomy, which brings compassionate contemplative exercises into the first year gross anatomy course. CARE, which is a core course for all first and second year medical students. CARE stands for Compassionate Action and Real Engagement in the Community. The Mentor Clinician Program, which is a mentorship, one-on-one mentorship program for third-year students during their clerkships, and also includes now a longitudinal curriculum during the third year. And the Sanford Scholars or Compassion Ambassador Program, which is mentored research opportunities for medical students who are finishing their first year and going into their second year to do a research project or a project having to do with empathy and compassion, and also includes some didactics. The Compassion Ambassador Program, or CAMP, is our program where we bring people from other medical schools here to San Diego to learn more about that, and then they go back to their home institutions and do their projects there, whereas the Sanford Scholars are here at UCSD. I could spend all day talking about these flagship programs, so I'm going to start with just telling you about the Compassionatomy and CARE course. And if you're interested in learning more about the others, again, we'll tell you how to contact us at the end. So Compassionatomy. So research has shown that contemplative practice is a very effective way of enhancing empathy and compassion, and also can enhance emotional resilience. And I was approached by the lead, Dr. Jeff Noel at UC San Diego for the anatomy course, and he really wanted to avoid what he often sees with dissection of human donors, which is that there's kind of a gallows humor that develops, there's a detachment, and students also usually talk about anatomy as a really seminal experience for them in medical school, and it's one of the first things that they do. And it may be the first time that they've encountered a person who is not alive, and they have to do a lot of manipulation with the donors. And so all of these things can lead to a lot of emotions. And so we thought, what a great place for them to start to be introduced to contemplative practices that can help them regulate their emotions, connect with one another, ground themselves, think about their meaning and purpose, express gratitude for the donor. So we started by putting these into some of the anatomy lab dissections, and then ended up expanding it to all of them. Important ingredient is that this is led by Dr. Noel. It's led by the course leadership so that it's fully integrated in the course. And we started it here at UC San Diego and now have adapted it for use at Case Western Reserve University and have some other partners that are looking to join us as well. And the adaptation was done in partnership with the Compassion Institute that developed a compassion cultivation training upon which these exercises are based. And we found that this works. We saw an increase in connection with the donor over the course of the course, as opposed to what we sometimes would see anecdotally, which is that people would pull back and become less and less attached to the donor as a human being. We saw this increase, you can see on the right-hand side of the screen here, and it was particularly in the sessions where in that first year when we did the compassion trainings, we had some sessions where we had that and other sessions where we didn't, and we saw a greater increase in those sessions where we had the exercises, so much so, and the students liked it so much that we then expanded it so that every single dissection session now has compassion exercises. This course gets consistently excellent course evaluation. They love it. They love the integration. They love how it helps them to connect with each other. And they tend to take care of the donor better than they did before we implemented Compassionatomy. And just there's a little less of that detached feeling of jokes and things like that. They really are putting their hand on the shoulder of the donor, for example, showing this kind of empathy and compassion for this first patient. This student says, anatomy felt like a lifeline for me this year. There were many hours of isolation with just myself and endless facts that I had to memorize. Anatomy gave me a rare chance in the week to form connections with my classmates and this donor, my very first patient. It made me feel less alone, and for that I will be forever thankful. We then were lucky to have the opportunity, because of a revision of our curriculum, to infuse empathy and compassion into the core curriculum for first and second year medical students by having an entire course dedicated to empathy and compassion, the CARE course. The course has three main elements: classroom sessions, which I'll talk a little bit more about, that build skills in empathy and compassion, 9 hours per quarter of observerships with a clinician, and 9 hours per quarter of what we call a real engagement in the community or community service learning. And these things interact because the hope is that they learn skills in the classroom that then they can apply or see examples of in the clinic and also in the community, and then bring stories back from the clinic and community into the classroom to share. These are the things that we encourage students to think about as they're starting this course. We want them to know themselves, connect with their meaning, build community, learn stories of others, and recognize those people's challenges. Observe how compassion looks in action in the clinic and community, and how it can sometimes fall short. Practice and hone the art of medicine through arts, humanities, contemplation, processing the journal. We give them journals for reflection, and then give specific sessions for processing, and practice compassion towards yourself. These are the sessions that we have in the first year of CARE, pointing out the case for compassion and compassionate communication, which is based on a lot of the curriculum from the fellowship, and the power of a story, where we introduce an assignment for all students to take the life story of one patient and write it in a first-person narrative. It's based on a VA program called My Life, My Story. Self-compassion and self-care, where we have a physician who practices mindful self-compassion talk about the importance of self-care and how self-care is patient care. And then compassionate upstander training, where we teach them to use compassionate strategies and communication to stand up in the face of bias and assumptions that people may be making. So how is CARE doing? This is the end of our second year of CARE, and what students really like are the patient panels, the small group connection, clinically relevant examples, and the observerships. What are challenges is they still feel like they don't have enough time, so this feels to them like time away from what they're being encouraged to do, which is to perform well on their exams, and that there may not be an immediate application of these skills because they are not yet in their clinical years. One example of this from a student on an end of the year evaluation: please end this course and help me pass STEP. Mindfulness is not going to make me a doctor. But our first cohort, there's still 28% of students who agree or strongly agree that the course is excellent, and 44% are neutral about this. And so the first cohort that we did last year is now going into their clinical year, and we are doing a longitudinal cohort study in my center to be able to examine the influence of this program over the 4 years that they're here and even beyond. But luckily, some of the students really had the kind of takeaways that we were hoping for. This student said, patience, humility, and understanding will be essential tools that I will utilize with my future patients to demonstrate empathy and compassion effectively. My goal will be to meet patients where they are. Another student said, mostly that it all starts with and depends on listening. We learned a lot about trying to understand the context of a person's feelings and actions, trying to understand their background and life first in order to provide the empathy and compassion they need and deserve. I definitely felt the power of that during the My Life, My Story assignment. I also think listening includes listening to yourself, to what you need, and giving that self-compassion to yourself. So what comes next for our applied and curricular programs? We need to know what is happening in the brain as the result of these curricular experiences. We want to close the loop between what we understand about the neuroscience of empathy and compassion and how these programs that we've developed are actually changing brain circuits. We also want to know, are there ways in which our knowledge of the neuroscience or neurobiology of empathy and compassion can change how we teach? What is the evidence to show that these arts and humanities curriculum, for example, are opening the brain in a way that other ways of teaching would not? What is really happening with patients and with patient experience? Most of our research has focused on the learners, but what about the effect that change, that learning and that changed attitude has on the patients that they serve? What's really happening with wellness in the long run? We know there's effects of wellness of our programs on in the short term. Do those last as they go on to, say, residency for the medical students, or as they continue on for the clinicians? And what is happening with the ripple effect? You heard Yvonne and Val talk about the ripple effect for their train the trainer programs, but also if we are exposing every single medical student to these ideas, what about when they go off to other institutions and when eventually they become teachers? Is there an effect of having had this as a foundational core course for them? So these are all the things that we're still asking questions about. We really thank you for your time and attention. And if you want to learn more, this QR code will take you to our website where you can sign up for a newsletter, and the website address is there too. We would love to be in contact with you if you'd like to partner.
Lisa and the panel, thank you so much. What an amazing discussion, and opens up so many questions. Among our several hundred folks, we've gotten many questions. So we only have about 5 or 8 minutes. I'm going to try to be strategic in where we go. I want to take advantage of the fact that we have at least two actors or theater artists here. And maybe you can just give us some color or some examples of what does this interaction between the fellows and artists and actors and journalists actually look like? Some examples of the exercises or the interactions.
Yeah, I think one of the most profound areas that this impacts is in role play. We do a lot of different types of theater exercises that kind of help warm up the person and get attuned with the other. But then we try to apply that in role play scenarios. And that to some degree the artists are the layperson. They offer the lay perspective, but they also offer perspectives on affect. How is the clinician coming across in their body language, their tone of voice? Is their compassionate communication landing? Are they moving too quickly? Are they using jargon? Those are some areas that the artists have been really impactful. And in terms of what the artists learn, there's so many lessons that artists are taught that have to do with breaking apart moment-to-moment behavior and understanding, standing in the shoes of another character. And artists don't really recognize the power of that training outside of the field of theater. So to give them that lens of how valuable that training is to other disciplines is really cool to watch.
Thank you for that. And I just wanted to kind of elaborate on a lot of the work that you do involves storytelling in one way or another. I wonder if you could, and that is a key part of the Schwartz Center programs. I wonder if you could elaborate on both the benefit of that and even the neuroscience of storytelling, to the extent that we know things about that.
Yeah, I can touch on the benefit of it. I'll toss it to Bill for the neuroscience, but story taps into all of our humanity, right? We all can relate to a story. And so for us, it brings everybody together from different disciplines, from different backgrounds, from different mindsets to be able to connect. And connection is the core of compassionate communication. So we use it as a tool to teach, but it's also important, I think, for our physicians and nurses and health providers to be able to elicit stories from their patients. And so it's a key foundational piece. I'm going to toss it to you, Bill.
Yeah, I have never seen a study looking at brain activations in response to a story, not really in that simple a way. It's a really interesting idea. My sense of it would be that you would see that as the listener becomes engaged and starts to empathize, that you would see activation of those brain regions that are the ACC and the AI would become engaged and much more active, I think a critical question becomes, what do you do? You're the listener. What do you do with that? And if you're listening to a story for the purpose of feeling with, then empathy is just fine, unless one gets overwhelmed, in which case one's not just fine. So what I'd like to have us do is perhaps even do a study of listening to stories, but then transitioning from the storyteller as a speaker to a storyteller as a questioner. So if you were in my shoes, what would you do? Which would encourage then the listener to pivot from the empathizer to the cognitive empathy thinker. And I mean, Michael, just more generally, I think if we could teach physicians and other people for that matter, how to listen and resonate with the speaker, but how to skillfully pivot, I think we would have a lot happier doctors and a lot of patients that felt that they'd really been listened to in a way they hadn't been in the past. I think physicians are burdened by the idea that if I listen really carefully, their problem is my problem. And that cognitive empathy piece is the thing that protects us against doing that. In fact, it's essential for being a good physician to not be overwhelmed by the suffering you see in front of you. So in my view, maybe the most important key study to do is, how do we enable people to pivot from resonating with to perceiving that a person is suffering?
Bill, thank you for that. I wanted to just go out and ask about, in general, medical education or healthcare education, if you had a sense for the state of compassion and empathy training embedded in the 200 medical and osteopathic schools, and then if you broaden out to all other schools, nursing, allied health, what's the state of the state, or where do you see the future going?
Yeah, I think I can take that one. We've done sort of a brief survey of other medical schools to start with, that have programs that are either sort of titled Arts and Humanities or titled have something to do with empathy and compassion. And there's probably about 20 or so medical schools that we know of that are doing programs that have those as titles. Now, I'm sure that there are sprinklings of arts and humanities and empathy and compassion teachings in other schools as well, maybe most schools. But in terms of having things that are named that way, I'm not as certain about other programs like allied profession programs or nursing programs. We haven't surveyed those as carefully. I think, though, that there is maybe a little bit less of an uphill battle in some other professions where I think in nursing, sort of the expectation is that you will be trained in empathy and compassion, that's part of being a nurse. And I think the problem that we have, or the challenge that we have with medical students, is that up until now, it hasn't been thought of as a key skill to develop for physicians, is empathy and compassion, and that's what we're trying to change.
Yeah. Thank you. Some of the folks asked about the work that you're doing and how it relates to some other programs in the chat. So I tried to pull several of these together. So they mentioned the Sacred Moments Initiative, which I've seen published recently, compassion cultivation training, or the Compassion Institute work, and self-compassion, which I think you've touched on, but maybe if you wanted to just address any similarities or differences.
I can take that. So the Compassion Institute training is more of a mindfulness contemplative training. Our training is skill-based in terms of compassionate communication. And I'm not familiar with the details of the other program. I don't know if Val or Lisa is.
Okay.
And self-compassion, I just want to touch on that. Self-compassion is essential to what we do and teach. In fact, Dr. Buckholz, who I showed at the beginning, he was in our pilot group, and he didn't even, through the fellowship, came to realize that he wasn't compassionate towards himself. And what he came out of the fellowship mostly was trying to appreciate the fact that he has to be compassionate to himself. I mean, when I went to medical school, I didn't think I was allowed to take care of me, or that I should be thinking ever about myself. So this is a huge part of the reflections that go on, at least through our training and through probably meditation and contemplative work as well, that you can't give what you don't have. If you don't take care of yourself, you'll have nothing to give.
Thank you so much. And with that, Julie is here to wrap us up and share a few other things. Thanks, Julie.
Thank you. What a wonderful conversation today. I wish we had more time. Thank you so much to our panelists and to all of you who joined us here today. We hope you enjoyed this Compassion in Action webinar, and thank you again to our sponsors. Please take a moment to fill out the very brief survey we'll be sending you after the webinar. We appreciate all of your feedback on today's session. And we'd also like to invite you to join us for compassion cultivation training. This is our fall cohort of the training. And this training incorporates evidence-based contemplative practices and real-world interactive exercises to support the learning. Register to join us in this cohort, which is exclusively for healthcare workers, by August 8th. Thank you for joining us.